Welcome, and thank you for joining us. I'm Jodi Wiseley, Executive Director of Parent and Family Programs and Operations, and I'll be your moderator for this student, parent, and family vaccine mandate town hall. We're happy to have you with us today as we cover important aspects and details related to the UC Office of the President vaccine mandate and how it impacts our campus here at UC San Diego. Please feel free to use the Q&A window to submit questions for our panelists throughout the presentations and during the question and answer portion. Due to our time limitation, we may not be able to get to all of your questions, but we will log the questions as they come in and post answers on the Return to Learn website. You can find the link for that website in the chat. Today's webinar has live closed captioning available in two ways. First, you can click on the closed caption button at the bottom of the screen and select Show Subtitles. Or you can also click on the link that is pasted into the chat now. And now I'd like to introduce Chancellor Pradeep Khosla for some welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Jodi, and good afternoon, and welcome, Triton students and families. Our Return to Learn strategy was designed with layers of protection to help keep our campus community safe. We always envisioned a Swiss cheese model where each slice of this cheese represents a layer of protection, although with holes in it. So one slice may have small holes, but combined with other slices, they all form a solid block of cheese. That's a good way to envision our multi-layered protection strategy. So in our case, this results in a solid block of protection against the SARS-CoV-2 virus. The UC vaccine mandate adds one more slice of protection to our block. Requiring vaccination is the next logical step to maintaining our record of low infection rates on campus. Vaccination is the most effective tool in our toolbox of defenses. It increases our ability to protect our students who want to experience everything UC San Diego has to offer in person. And the UC system is not alone in setting this policy. More than 600 colleges and universities, both public and private, nationwide, have announced vaccine mandates. So, as Chancellor, I urge you to get vaccinated if you've not already done so. Local students, you can make an appointment at the Price Center here on campus. It is free, it is easy, and it is fast. And for out-of-town students, you can check with your healthcare provider or your local health department. In today's town hall, you will learn about the steps required to comply with the vaccine policy. You will learn how to review your vaccination status in your student health chart. For those who have been vaccinated outside of UC San Diego, you will learn how to upload your proof of vaccination. And for those who are not able to be vaccinated, you will learn how to request an exception or deferral for this policy. We are here to answer your questions, and our resources are available anytime on the Return to Learn website. And instructions for all these options are available under Vaccination Mandate tab on the Return to Learn website. Our campus, for those of you who may not know, has been one of the safest places in San Diego and actually throughout the country and throughout the pandemic. I have been so impressed during the last 18 months by our students and the way they managed and navigated the pandemic. At every time during the pandemic, from day one, we've had about 9,000 students on campus and with zero outbreaks. And you, our students, have played a very important, a very vital role in our success. So I deeply appreciate your willingness to take precautions for yourselves and for others in our community as we look forward to starting the fall quarter. We will, of course, continue our success because of your ongoing commitment to safety. So to everybody, I want to say, faculty, students, and staff, thank you for your efforts. Thank you for your resilience. And thank you for your Triton spirit. Back to you, Jodi.
Thank you, Chancellor Khosla. I would now like to welcome our host of this town hall, Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, Alysson Satterlund.
Thank you so much, Jodi, and thanks to all of you for being in attendance this evening. Before we begin, I would like to express my gratitude to my colleagues who have joined us to share their expertise. And I also want to acknowledge that despite having the benefit of COVID-19 vaccines, we we know anxiety and uncertainty remain high for some in our community. And so it's our intention that this evening's town hall will serve to reduce concerns and empower you with accurate information. As many of you know, and as the Chancellor just outlined for us, the University of California has mandated that all students and employees will be vaccinated for the COVID-19 virus, or have an approved exemption prior to the start of this academic year. And with this in mind, the focus of tonight's town hall is going to be on this specific vaccine mandate. However, I know that many of our parents and families and students have some additional concerns about the student experience. And I want to just highlight a couple of resources. So fortunately, we have a new parent and family office. This team has been assembled to enhance communication, create opportunities for meaningful engagement and support of our parents and families. And for our students, all of us here tonight represent offices, colleagues, faculty partners, peer leaders, and resources from across campus who are eager to see you in person soon and have been preparing for your return to campus. And as a reminder, the questions that we aren't available to address this evening will be posted as new FAQs on the Return to Learn site. So I just really want to encourage you to return to that location on our website on a regular basis for new and updated information. I want to thank you for your patience and grace as we navigate this pandemic alongside you. We have a shared goal, a safe, inclusive, welcoming, and transformative Triton student experience for all of our graduate and undergraduate students. And we do believe that the COVID-19 vaccine mandate will help us meet those goals together. So Jodi, thank you so much for having Student Affairs host tonight, and I'll turn it back over to you and our colleagues.
Thank you, VC Satterlund. I would now like to welcome our first presenter, Dr. Chip Spooley, Professor of Medicine, to talk about the Delta variant and vaccine safety.
Thanks very much, Jodi. And I also want to add my welcome to the incoming students for the fall. We can't wait for you to get here. As Chancellor Koschel said, we had a really great year last year with all of the support of the students under very difficult circumstances. And this year we expect to be even better because we have another very important tool to help us keep the university even safer than it was last year. I'm going to be relatively brief and just talk about the rationale for why the University of California thinks COVID vaccination is important as a tool to help us get through this pandemic and to operate the campus more safely. You'll hear more about the mechanics of how this will be administered by Dr. Sosha, who will follow me later. Now, why do we have vaccines? The main reason to have vaccines is to prevent people from getting sick. And that's been something that has been the reason vaccines have been developed for hundreds of years. And that was what drove the development of COVID vaccines. Secondary goals are to try to reduce the amount of transmission of the virus or bacterium in the population, in the community. And we do this by two methods. One is by decreasing the number of people who get infected. And secondly, by having those who are infected have some immunity to keep the level of virus down, it makes it harder for the virus to be transmitted to other people. And in this particular virus, because it is developing new variants, as we'll discuss in a minute, and it can only do that when it is replicating or growing in people, the fewer people we have who are infected, the less likely we're going to be to have to deal with a string of newer and newer variants over the coming months and years. Next slide. Now, the clinical trials for these studies were done last year, for these vaccines were done last year, and they involved tens of thousands of people, were supported by the NIH and other entities. And what they basically showed, it was very similar to this example from the Pfizer study. Participants were recruited and vaccinated either with the vaccine or with an identical placebo, and then were followed to see whether or not they developed symptomatic infection. You can see that the people who received the non-vaccine, the placebo, continued to accumulate new illness events at about the same rate they were experiencing them before they were vaccinated, all the way through the study. About 12 to 14 days into the study, the people who received the vaccine, the active vaccine on the red line, had a sharp departure and began to have fewer and fewer new infections. And this was something that persisted throughout the entire observation period of the study. Next slide. Now, we've seen since the vaccination clinical trials were finished, tens of millions of people have been vaccinated in the US and even more around the world. Very careful safety records have been kept. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But the observation in the real world has been that this most recent flare has been most intense in places that vaccination rates have been lowest. So in addition to the clinical trials that demonstrated the benefits of vaccination in terms of decreasing new cases and decreasing hospital utilization and deaths, our experience with the surge that we're having over the last month is clearly showing that places where vaccines have lagged, the virus has thrived. Next slide. Now, what do we know virologically? These are data that were just published about 10 days ago. And what they show is that on the green line, people who are vaccinated lose virus in their throat, in their noses, faster than people who have not been vaccinated in the red line if they get infected. So one of the things that the vaccines help us do is, even in people who happen to get infected after being exposed, and it's harder to get infected after you've been vaccinated, but even in those who do get infected, the immune response that the vaccine has provided helps you clear the virus much more rapidly and makes you less infectious to other people. This is increasingly important as the vaccines that we're seeing, the viruses that we're seeing turn out to be the Delta variant. Next slide. And the Delta variant is in fact what we're seeing here at UC San Diego. One of the other layers of the Swiss cheese that Dr. Chancellor Koschler did not mention was the wastewater program, in which we watch very carefully evidence of viral activity in wastewater from our buildings. And we're able to use that information to know when an infected person is in that building. And we then redouble our efforts to do COVID testing to identify the person, to get them medical care if they need it, and to isolate and quarantine them to keep the virus from shedding. And what this shows you in this bar graph, starting last November, Dr. Rob Knight and Dr. Karthikeyan began to look at the viral variants that were present in the wastewater collection. And you can see that starting in April, a purple bar appears kind of in the middle of the graphic and expands to include the entire bar by July. This purple bar is the Delta variant. So what we're dealing with right now on our campus is the same thing that we're seeing throughout the country. The Delta variant is what is being spread most frequently. Next slide. The reason this has caused a problem around the country and around the world where it has arrived is that it is more infectious than the original SARS-CoV-2 we've been dealing with up until now. This graph shows on the x-axis, going from left to right, viruses from the least transmissible to the most transmissible. And you can see that influenza is not very transmissible compared to measles, which is way out there on the right. And you can see that the SARS-CoV-2 we were dealing with before the Delta variant came along was slightly more transmissible than seasonal flu. But what happened with this new Delta variant, because the virus grows so much better, is it moved way to the right, and it's about as infectious as chickenpox. So all the things we were doing in the past are still effective, but the more layers of Swiss cheese we can apply, the more effective they're going to be. And luckily, the vaccines we're using are effective against the Delta variant and help us quite a bit in dealing with this increased infectivity. Next slide. The vaccines that are mainly available in the US, and I know this is an international audience, so I'll speak to some of the others as well, include 2 messenger RNA vaccines made by Pfizer and by Moderna. And then there are vaccines that use adenovirus, viral vector vaccines that are made by AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, and the Russian Sputnik V vaccines. Each of these vaccines each of these 2 approaches use the ability of your own cells to make a bit of what the virus shows you when you're infected, to train your immune system to look for it. In other words, it helps you make a little bit of the viral spike protein in your muscle where the vaccine is injected. And if you get exposed to the real virus, your immune system knows what to look for, and that's what provides you the immunity. A protein subunit vaccine is coming along, not out yet, so I won't speak about it. There are 2 inactivated virus vaccines available in China and India, made by several companies, and they too are being used around the world. Next slide. And what do we know about side effects? We know the side effects of these vaccines are very similar to the side effects of other vaccines. This is a somewhat small slide to read, but if you look at the left cluster of data, the bars are really just frequency of having a sore arm at the site of injection. And the message here is that you have a sore arm for a few days, the site of injection in most people. The cluster of data on the right show you that some people have systemic symptoms, mainly low-grade fever and malaise, tiredness, that may last a day or two. And that's usually either requires no intervention or it does require some Tylenol or modest symptom relieving drugs. These side effects are what we see with virtually any vaccine that we've been giving for childhood and adult infections. We do worry, next slide, about some of the more rare complications, and we're following them very closely. Most recently, one of the complications that has been described with the messenger RNA vaccines is a complication called myocarditis. Cardium means muscle in the heart. Itis means inflammation. And it's been seen in about 1 in 100,000 to 1 in 250,000 people who get the vaccination. It occurs several days, usually after the second vaccination, and has been reversible. We see this same kind of problem in people who have COVID, but we see it more often. We don't know the mechanism of this. It's being looked at very carefully, but I want to emphasize it's rare and reversible with the vaccines that can be much more severe and associated with heart failure in COVID itself. So let me go to the last slide and just go back to where we started and say that our goal here with the vaccination is to help our campus, including our students, our faculty, and our staff, operate safely, to protect our community, and to help us put this virus to bed by preventing it from being able to develop new variants by ongoing infections on campus. Now, let me turn this back over to other panelists, and I'm looking forward to your questions in the question and answer period. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Schooley. I'd now like to introduce our second presenter, Dr. Cynthia Jamfi-Bannerman, Endowed Chair and Professor of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Science.
Hi, I too would like to extend my welcome to all of you. And while you may or may not be pregnant now or considering a future pregnancy, I think it's very important to speak about the potential risks of COVID infection in pregnancy and just to understand how safe the vaccines are for pregnancy. Most importantly, in this slide, I want you all to see that pregnant people are in fact at a higher risk of illness once they get infected with COVID compared to those who are not pregnant. This just compares the numbers when women who are pregnant versus not, and the ICU admission rate, ventilation rate, ECMO, and death rates were all significantly higher in pregnant people compared to those who weren't pregnant who also had COVID. Next slide, please. I know Dr. Schooley very eloquently described how the vaccines work. I'm just going to very specifically focus in on pregnancy and how they work, and it doesn't hurt to have a review. Basically, the vaccines carry genetic information that make the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2, which is the name of the virus that causes COVID. These little red spikes here on the bottom left are the spikes that are being made by the mRNA. And those are what's recognized by your immune system. So it goes in locally, really at the area where you inject yourself, but then it's degraded, and by 2 to 3 days, it's completely outside of your system. So it never goes into your DNA. It doesn't change your genetic material in any way. So they act locally, and we know now that they're not particularly efficient at crossing the placenta and reaching any of those areas. Importantly, to reiterate, they are not live virus vaccines. They do not enter the nucleus of cells. They don't alter the DNA in any way, and they cannot cause any genetic changes. Next slide, please. This is a very important paper that was published in the New England Journal, published online in April, and then ultimately again in June. Basically, it shows from the VAERS or VSafe registry, all of those women who sign on to the registry, who got vaccinated, who were pregnant. And it has about 2.5 months of data. Of the 35,000 participants that identified as pregnant, about 4,000 entered their information into VSafe. And at the time of publication, 827 had completed a pregnancy. And what the table here shows you on the right is that when you compare the pregnancy complication rate in the vaccinated folks to kind of historical controls, there's no difference in rates of pregnancy complications. And so really very good data to suggest that the vaccine is safe. And then yesterday, in fact, the CDC came out with similar data on 2,500 women who were vaccinated early on in the pregnancy at less than 20 weeks or just before pregnancy. And again, no change in pregnancy outcomes and no increase in the miscarriage rate. Next slide, please. So really in the last 2 weeks, a lot has changed in terms of pregnancy recommendations. The societies that kind of govern and make recommendations for what to do in pregnancy, 3 of them changed their recommendations. ACOG, which is the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, recommends that pregnant individuals are vaccinated against COVID-19. SMFM, Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine, went on to say that vaccination is the best method to reduce maternal and fetal complications of SARS-CoV-2 infection. And then ASRM, which is the Society for Reproductive Medicine, says that either preconception or early during pregnancy, vaccination is the best way to reduce maternal and fetal complications. COVID-19 vaccination does not impact your fertility, your future fertility, whether male or female, and it doesn't change your fertility treatment outcomes. And similarly, again, yesterday, the CDC also recommended vaccination in pregnancy. When you vaccinate during pregnancy, you also can pass on antibodies to your baby, which is fantastic. So your baby's born with protection. There are antibodies in the breast milk as well, but it's not as easily transmittable as if it's done during pregnancy. So these are just things to keep in mind as you're asking yourself whether you should get vaccinated, but we think it's very important. And again, thank you for having me, and I'll pass it over back to Jodi. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jancy Bannerman. I would now like to introduce our last presenter, Dr. Angela Sosha, Interim Executive Director of Student Health and Wellbeing and Chair of the Vaccine Mandate Working Group.
Thanks, Jodi, and welcome again, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you this evening and share some of the operational details about what we're doing to keep the campus safe. First of all, the deadline for compliance is September the 6th. That's 2 weeks before we start our fall quarter. Keep in mind that that's just over a holiday weekend. So we really want people to comply and let us know their status as soon as possible, and certainly no later than September 2nd, so you can make the deadline before the holiday weekend. There are 2 ways to comply with the vaccine program. To become fully vaccinated, which means you've had your complete series of vaccination and it's 2 weeks have passed. At that point, you've received the full benefit of the vaccination. The other way is to have an approved exception or deferral. And please put those requests in early so that we can give you good information. A lot of questions are coming about before students who are partially vaccinated, particularly some individuals internationally living now who get a complete series, or individuals who are living and have no access to vaccination and want to vaccinate. We've got special forms for them in the student process, which allows them to notify us of their intent to complete vaccination or to vaccinate upon arrival. So we are all set up to prepare to receive them and to complete their vaccination once they reach the US. Next slide. Next slide. Great. So for individuals who have approved exemptions or have not fully completed their vaccination, there are non-pharmaceutical interventions that will be required. These are defined by the campus and they may change over the course of the year as we keep up with this virus. We also have recommendations that will be applied to the vaccinated community as well. So it's not this only applies, but there will be unique of those individuals who are able to be vaccinated or for a variety of reasons. These include masking as well as what we call surveillance or asymptomatic testing, Right now, our plan in the fall quarter is that unvaccinated individuals will test twice a week, no less than 3 days apart and no more than 5 days apart. This will be required of everyone with an approved exception or deferral, as well as the individuals who are able to vaccinate until they arrive here or the partially vaccinated community. They will follow all of these recommendations. Next slide. Next slide. Great. So how do you document it? Basically, your student health record is your My Student Chart. This is a very secure health record. It is connected to the health system, Epic medical record system. And we're able to demonstrate compliance with the vaccine mandate if you are fully vaccinated, because we have vaccination information in your clinical record. There's nothing else a student needs to do. If you don't want us to take advantage of this information on the health record, which is hard to understand why you wouldn't want that, but if you wouldn't want that, please let the VCA office know by August the 12th. Otherwise, we will be leveraging in your health record to show compliance with the mandate. For individuals who are receiving international vaccination, as long as it is a WHO approved vaccine, you will meet compliance with the mandate. If you've had partial vaccination with the WHO approved vaccine, Student Health will provide you with clinical guidance as how to complete appropriately what the best way to clinically complete your vaccination series. There's a lot of information on the Return to Learn website. Please take advantage of that. Next slide. So if you had your vaccination by UC San Diego Health, which includes all of our health systems clinics, as well as the Petco site that we were running, the REMAX site here on campus, and the current Price Center vaccination site, the information will be in your student health record. It will automatically move over. If you do not complete your series with UC San Diego Health, let's say you only had one vaccine with us and one vaccine, a second dose with another provider, you'll need to enter information. Or if all of your vaccination was acquired outside of UC San Diego Health, you'll need to add your information into your My Student Chart. You go into your record, you see if there's any information available, because some providers in the state of California or San Diego have been sharing immunization information, and there's a way that this has been allowed to be safely and securely shared throughout the state. There may be some information in there as well. If there's nothing, you upload the information of the vaccination type and dates and provide a photo record of your vaccine evidence of proof of vaccination. Once you've done that in your record, it's done, you're compliant with the mandate. Next slide. But there will be some individuals who will ask for and need medical and disability exemptions. These require certification by a healthcare provider. They may be permanent, such as a contraindication or precaution to vaccination recognized by the CDC or the vaccine manufacturer, or they may be temporary, such as an individual who recently had a COVID-19 infection, in which case you're allowed up to 90 days to then eventually vaccinate. You don't have to wait 90 days. In fact, it's clinically safe to do it much sooner, but we want you to wait no longer than 90 days to vaccinate, even if you've had a natural infection or you have a positive antibody test. Again, for the partially vaccinated student or student who doesn't have access to vaccine because of international location at the moment, just fill out one of our forms, let us know, and you'll need to vaccinate within 8 weeks of arrival, and that will be available to you at the Price Center. Next slide. So the process for students who need or exceptions or deferrals or asking for requesting these is they fill out a ticket on our ServiceNow request, and this is in more detail again in the Return to Learn. We then accumulate those requests. Our student health team, we have a COVID mandate team that is actually working on this, and they distribute the requests. They are reviewed in various offices. Student health is looking at the medical and the deferral requests. We have the Office of Student Disabilities looking at disability, and the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs Office is looking at religious requests. Then you will receive information after your request has been reviewed that it's been approved or denied. If it's been denied, then you will have 8 weeks to come into compliance to allow you to be on campus. Next slide. So I want to reiterate the really important approach that we have here on campus to keeping our community safe. It has been science-driven throughout. It has been highly adaptable as new information becomes available. We actually haven't been living with this virus that long, and we continue to learn constant new information. You heard some recent new information about pregnancy, very reassuring and very important information. So we're always looking at the science. We have three pillars to our plan: viral detection, interventions, and risk mitigation. In the detection, we have our testing program. It is readily available to all of our campus community at no cost. Our wastewater, I'll talk a little bit about. And we have a team that's looking at all the information every day of positive students or employees, as well as what's happening in the San Diego community and throughout the nation, as well as the globe. We have local molecular sequencing. Dr. Schooley showed you our data recently released on our own sequencing. Interventions. That is identifying positive cases. When they're identified, they provide clinical support. We do contact tracing, exposure notification, and we communicate with the county on that process. The third part is risk mitigation. And this pillar has really been enhanced by vaccination. It is key. The second really important part is face coverings. We know masking makes a huge difference. We continue with cleaning, sanitation. We've improved our airflow throughout campus. So all of these things together have allowed us to stay safer than many areas, and we'll continue to adapt and use the science. Next slide. So we have another tool, which is our daily symptom screener. In that, you'll be asked questions about, are you having any symptoms of COVID-19? Have you been exposed to someone with COVID-19? And if you don't have either of those, get a green thumb, you're good to go. Every day we check. If you have exposure, there'll be clinical guidance on what you need to do. We're testing individuals post-exposure, regardless of vaccination, day 3 to 5 after exposure. This really convert to infection from exposure. And we offer the symptomatic, we also offer testing for anyone with symptoms. That testing is done in multiple on campus as well as the center. Next slide. And so I want to talk about our testing because we're really fortunate. In the lower right hand corner, you'll see something that's one of our innovations. We developed a way to allow self-administered COVID-19 testing. Students have been and employees have been great with this. We've used it throughout the year. We have vending machines that you use your ID card to access a kit, has all the tools you need to self-administer, do a swabbing of your anterior nares, the lower part of your nose, submit the test, drop it in the bin, and have a result back within 24 hours. That test is linked to you using your campus ID and the campus app. We'll talk about that in a second. This has worked great. You can get a test every single day, any day throughout the campus. We have multiple locations of the vending machines. We also though have provider administered and provider observed testing at the Price Center for individuals who don't like the self-testing option. Although quite honestly, most of our students and employees love it. We also have wastewater monitoring. Individuals infected with this virus shed the virus not only in their nose, their nares, and out of their lungs and their breath, they also shed it in their feces. And so we've been monitoring wastewater streams, and we get early signals that there is virus in the building from someone who has used the facilities. We use this to signal individuals, our residents, students living on campus, that there's a signal in the building you're living in. We want everyone in that building, regardless of vaccination status, to test. This helps us quickly identify infections on campus. Next slide. And this is actually on our dashboard. We tell you every day which buildings are showing a signal. Luckily, most of them don't show signals. The other part we have is we have good support for students who develop infections. We provide this whether you're a student living on our campus or in our San Diego community. The student health team provides clinical support, safely guides that student to make sure they complete their isolation period. If they need additional medical support, they help coordinate that. Our counseling and psychological services provides mental health support to the individuals. It is a tough period to go through isolation, but there's a lot there as well. Our basics needs teams, as well as others, our housing and dining, everyone works to take care of our students. We have isolation and quarantine dedicated housing. For this fall, it will be in housing that is located adjacent to campus with meals provided by the campus housing and dining team. This is offered both for our residential students on campus as well as those living off campus. For individuals who've been exposed, there is a period in which they need to carefully monitor for symptoms. If they are unvaccinated and living in campus residential housing, they will be moved to quarantine housing. They will need to test between day 3 and 5. The vaccinated community will do additional monitoring, continue to monitor and additional masking, but they don't have to move to the quarantine housing. Next slide. So this is a little bit of the grid. It's a little bit complicated, but it shows you the complexity and thoughtfulness that we have in our program. Residential students, regardless of vaccination, when they arrive on campus, the undergraduates will be giving a test on arrival day 5 and day 10. This is to make sure someone doesn't inadvertently arrive on campus without symptoms and shed virus, exposing others. The students will be masking in their residential units everywhere except their bedrooms and and in the shower. So this is another safety measure. We continue that until we're real comfortable that the viral level in the campus is very low or non-existent, at which point we have allowed in past quarters students living in residential units to not have to mask inside their personal unit. We've not had visitation between units, which is another layer of safety there as well. For our employees and our non-residential students, if they are vaccinated, we're going to want them certainly to test if they have symptoms or wastewater signals in the buildings they've been in. If they're unvaccinated, we will want that part of our community to be testing within 48 hours of arrival onto campus, and then twice weekly surveillance testing. We're actively considering whether we need to do some surveillance testing. And surveillance means you don't have symptoms. The only reason we're testing is a surveillance check, not because of symptoms or exposure. We may be doing that for the vaccinated community as well. We're keeping an eye on that, and we'll make a decision in upcoming weeks. For everyone, if you have symptoms or there's a wastewater signal in a building that you've used the facility in, we want you to test. And the testing, again, available on campus, free, readily available. Next slide. Now, just a couple of the tools we have for our students. Again, My Student Chart. You can add the app to your phone. It works really well. You use your Campus AD logon, create a password. We've already created a medical record for you as a student. All the students have them, but they need to activate that medical record through this process. This is how the clinical teams will communicate with the students. Next slide, and just how you'll get your COVID test results. Next slide. The other thing is the importance of the UC San Diego app. We use this app because your test has a barcode on it. When you get the test out of the vending machine, it has a barcode. You capture that barcode on your phone after you've logged in, and it links and syncs that test to you as an individual. So this becomes really important that you have the app loaded on your phone and that you carefully scan the barcode to link the test to you. Students learn how to do it. It works great. Next slide. And the other thing is to remind you to take advantage of the Cal Notify app on your phone. This is a way to quickly signal if, actually it's your cell phone, but hopefully that's with you, has been proximity to an individual with a recent diagnosis of COVID-19. It helps notify you possibly before a public health or a student health member is able to tell you of an exposure. You'll get this very rapid exposure by having this app on your phone. So we're encouraging all of our community to take advantage of this technological tool. Next slide. I think, Jodi, it's back to you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Sosha. I know we were having a little challenge with some bandwidth during Dr. Sosha's presentation. So as we move into our question and answer segment, and I invite all of our panelists to turn on their video, Dr. Sosha is going to leave her video off just so we can get really clear audio from her as we move into questions and answers. During registration, attendees had an opportunity to submit questions for the panelists, and we've selected some of the most popular questions for the panel to answer here tonight. If you have a question now, please use the Q&A window to submit additional questions during this session, and our panelists will do their best to provide answers. Due to time limitations, we may not be able to get to all of your questions. However, we will do our best to post answers in the FAQ at the Return to Learn website, and the link for that is in the chat. All right, so let's dive in. I'll start with you, VC Satterlund. And can you just tell us a bit about what the process will be for students who are not complying with the mandate?
Thanks, Jodi. This is a question that we get regularly. Is that a bit better? I don't know if there was an echo. I heard an echo, so my apologies there. We do get this question regularly. So we will be applying the same progressive discipline approach that we utilized all last year, which is there's got to be a barrier to the student not being in compliant. How can we help remove that barrier? So we'll be working with our case management team to do outreach, to provide education and support to secure the vaccination or the required exemption. There are 3 exemption options. They should capture the majority of concerns or options that would put a student in a situation where they weren't compliant. Perhaps there's a technology challenge that has kept the student from uploading the appropriate paperwork. Will be there to resolve that particular situation. If for some particular reason, even with support, the student, regardless of whether they're a professional, graduate, or undergraduate student, has made the decision to not be in compliance, they'll be referred to our Office of Student Conduct for due process to take its place.
Thank you so much. Dr. Schooley, is there any sense of whether or not booster shots will be required? And if booster shots become required, will UCSD create an easy way for students to get them? Dr. Schooley, I think you're muted.
I unmuted and I got remuted by someone else. Okay, unmuted now, I hope. There's no question but that we're going to need booster shots. We're seeing the FDA and CDC more recently recognizing that immunocompromised people are going to need boosters. We know from other coronaviruses that have been circulating in the human population for hundreds of years that immunity declines over time. And that's happening with this virus. It's happening with these vaccines. And we've talked today about the evolution of new variants. People who are being revaccinated first are ones who are more likely to get in trouble if they get infected after vaccination. That's what we're seeing in the hospital now. 99.5% of people who are dying of COVID now are unvaccinated people. That 0.5% who've been vaccinated and still get sick are people in general who have underlying conditions that would have made them more likely to get in trouble in the pre-vaccination days. So those would be logical people to offer revaccination to first, and that will be the first priority. But I am convinced that we're going to all need to be revaccinated as the virus evolves. And it's hard to give a concrete prediction, but my bet is it'll be sometime in early 2022 that we'll be offering revaccination to wider swaths of the population. There is work going on to make the booster shots look more like the Delta variant, and it's very easy to tweak these vaccines. And as new variants arise, the vaccines will be tweaked to look like the new variants to provide more protection against the new variants. And we will continue to be up at the cutting edge of what's available for protection of students, faculty, and staff. And when these new vaccines are available, they'll be available here.
Thank you so much. Director Dorado, can international students arrive early in order to become fully vaccinated before classes begin?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jodi, for the question. All of the international students that are on an F1 visa status, they were issued Form I-20s, which are documents that facilitate their entry into the United States. Many of those have start dates of September 20th, which is the first day of the fall quarter. So students can enter up to 30 days prior to the start date on that I-20, which lands at about August 21st. So students can enter as early as August 21st.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Sosha, are international students who are not able to be vaccinated in their home countries able to be vaccinated when they arrive here at UC San Diego?
Absolutely. No question about that. And we also know some students may have not completed the entire series internationally, and we'll work with each student to give them the clinical support in the vaccination series that works well for them.
Thank you. Executive Director Jodi, Will students be assigned rooms in on-campus housing based on vaccination status?
Thank you, Jodi. Great question. Our science modeling has showed us that there is really low risk of transmission when we house vaccinated and unvaccinated students together. But when we house unvaccinated students together, there is a greater risk of infection. So hence, we will be housing both vaccinated and unvaccinated students together. It is important to keep in mind that vaccination records are really private and confidential. So campus will not be sharing that information with students or really anyone else unless it's truly needed to be known on a need-to-know basis, and usually for internal purposes. Hence, I would even recommend that our students are not asking each other if they're vaccinated or not, because again, it truly is private and confidential information. But I will share that it's important to know that HDH will not be able to change room assignments based on a resident's known or perceived vaccination status, because again, science would not support it. Thank you, Jodi.
So much. VC Satterlund, can you talk a bit about what resources are available to assist students with finding off-campus housing?
I know, I was just offering this in the chat to someone who posed the question. So we do have an off-campus housing coordinator who is a part of our team in student affairs. And this person has been working closely with a partner of ours in real estate to connect with apartment complexes and those who rent properties outside of the UTC La Jolla region, because we know that I think there are a handful of options available adjacent to campus. So we're working to get students to consider living a little bit farther away from campus. And then based on those partnerships, working to put into place a modified shuttle, or to make sure that some of those partnerships are adjacent to the bus line, which is free for students. So really encouraging our students and their families to consider living a bit farther away from campus. That's where we are at this time. It's a really, really challenging situation.
So much. Dean Moore, we had a question regarding will the university provide remote instruction to students that have underlying health conditions and or are concerned about the Delta variant?
Currently, we're planning on having primarily in-person instruction. We will have some remote courses, and this is evolving as time goes on. If a student has a medical condition that would require that they not attend in person, they should contact the Office for Students with Disabilities. And with the appropriate medical documentation, it's possible that some type of remote instruction may be provided as an accommodation for that condition.
Dr. Sosha, will non-vaccinated family members or guests be allowed on campus? And what might those non-pharmaceutical constraints look like?
So a couple things. Everyone on the campus community, visitors as well as our own members, will be masked indoors. And we'll start that fall, and that will be true for everyone. It's really important, that masking. For our visitors, we have many families helping their students move in. We ask that there only be 2 individuals. We don't want anyone who's had a recent infection is under their isolation period to come to campus. That would be breach of isolation. We don't want individuals who are developing symptoms and might be developing infection to come onto campus. And that's true for our students as well. If they're in that setting, we'll give them advice about how to delay arrival so that they don't have to move to isolation and quarantine housing or expose other individuals. We will not require a visitor to show proof of vaccination. But we encourage individuals to take advantage of vaccination, to, if they're coming onto campus, consider a test before they arrive. But certainly, if there's any question, they should be masked in the outdoor spaces as well as the indoor spaces. So please respect our requirement for masking indoors. Also, to let folks know, in our residential spaces, we do not allow visitors. Our students are not at this time moving between different units. They stay only in their own unit. So both other visitors from the campus community or the external world will not be visiting our students in their residential units to really minimize risk of infection there.
Dr. Schooley, can you talk a bit about how the UC system arrived at the need to have a vaccine mandate policy?
There was there have been a large number of consultations among the faculty, staff, the administration, including the vaccine community and the medical community. And we looked at the implications of vaccinated University of California community versus one that was not, and concluded that by vaccinating everyone that we could vaccinate, we would decrease the number of people who got sick, the number of classes that had to be canceled, the amount of virus spread on the campus. It would make it much better for the entire University of California population. So it was really based on looking at both benefits to the individual people being vaccinated and to our ability to operate a safe and effective campus operation.
Thank you. Dr. Sosha, we had a question regarding what policies will be in place for students who travel home or away from campus during school breaks.
Well, there'll be a couple. We're encouraging individuals who leave campus for unmasked activities if they're vaccinated to, when they return, to go through that testing process of regular testing. I think that's important, to be mindful of symptoms, and they should then mask in their residential units until they've had a negative test as well. We will start off the fall quarter with masking the residential units until we stabilize. And then when we go forward with allowing the mask to drop only in the residential units for those individuals living there, if they leave for unmasked activities, they go back to masking for a period of time as well. It is something that we'll consider is a lot of testing after the fall Thanksgiving break. Last year, we assessed the situation, encouraged students to stay on campus, as many who could, and then to do careful testing when they returned. Each quarter, we do a restabilization and retesting of the community because we know there are changes between quarters. So that process has worked very well last year for our our spring, winter, and fall each quarter. So it takes us a few weeks, and after about 3 weeks, we're pretty stable again.
ABC Figueroa, are there any academic options for students who choose not to submit to the mandate?
Thank you for the question. And we encourage everybody to take a look at our website, Return to Learn, to familiarize yourself with the exemption and deferrals. Hopefully you got some answers as well with Dr. Schooley referring to the Office for Students with Disabilities. The mandate will be in place, and if exceptions or deferrals are approved, we will continue to ask that everyone follows the safety guidelines. Anybody who is not in compliance will, as VC Satterlund shared, may face disciplinary action. So again, we encourage you to continue to learn, to inform yourself, and to ensure that if you are able to apply for a deferral or an exemption, that you go ahead and do that.
Dr. Sosha, are there any reasons besides medical or religious that a student can request an exemption to the vaccination mandate?
Well, the medical, and that includes some disabilities. There is an option for a pregnancy deferral, but as you heard from Dr. Jeffrey Bannerman, that it really has the medical community is encouraging pregnant women to vaccinate, but there is that option under the mandate. So those are some of the reasons for exceptions to be granted.
had this question come up a few times. I know we've talked about it a little bit before, but Dr. Sosha, if you could just remind us what procedures international students need to follow if they aren't vaccinated until they arrive at UC San Diego, or they're only partially vaccinated.
Sure. And I apologize that you were getting the intermittent signal there. It seems like taking out the earpods, which I thought would help. Actually, they were a distractor. So lesson learned as we zoom away. So if you have had a WHO approved vaccine, you meet the mandate. There may be situations, though, that the vaccine you had, we would clinically recommend you have supplemental vaccination. We know that some of the live virus vaccines have not been as effective as the adenovirus as well as the messenger RNA. So in that setting, even though you would meet the mandate, we may offer you vaccination because it's clinically going to be helpful for you. The other is you're partially vaccinated, depending on which vaccine you received. We'll complement that with appropriate vaccination here as well. And the other, you couldn't have access to a vaccine, you're fully unvaccinated, we'll vaccinate you when you get here.
One more question, Dr. Sosha. What is the mask policy for students while in classrooms or labs? And will it vary depending on vaccination status?
At this point, every one of us, regardless of our vaccination status, will be masking indoors. Okay, and it will stay that way for a while. So we mask when we are inside, except if you happen to be in an office by yourself, no one else is around, it's an enclosed space, then you're able to take your mask off. We also don't eat and drink inside unless we are in a single person in an enclosed space. Outdoor, right now, we have some outdoor classrooms. We don't think we're going to have to mask in those settings. We are looking at that very carefully because students are in that space for a little more prolonged time. We're looking at the density. We're looking at the types of classes that are occurring there. So very thoughtful look at the outdoor spaces and some settings where we may actually encourage masking, such as convocation, where it's a large group of individuals for a prolonged period in close proximity. We're going to recommend masking. We're looking at our sporting events. We're looking at a number of settings, and where we think we need masking is going to give a safety measure, we're going to put it in place. We don't want it so that people can't enjoy our campus, can't enjoy some freedom, some time without a mask, but we want to be safe.
Thank you so much. We have time for just one more question. Executive Director Jodi, if a student is in on-campus housing and tests positive for COVID, what are the procedures for both that student and those that they may have come into contact with?
Jodi, that's an excellent question. And again, we have successfully worked through this over the last 18 months. Housing works in very close partnership with Student Health Services. Student Health Services would notify our EOC center on campus, and they would make arrangements with the student to pack personal belongings, and an EOC driver would come pick up the student and take them to isolation housing. They will be given a list of just a reminder of things to pack, like your textbooks, chargers, and once the student arrives at isolation housing, they will also have a list of grocery items that if they would like to order, it will get delivered to their room. They will also be able to select meals that they would like, especially in terms of dietary preferences or restrictions. And our HDH dining team will prepare the meal so we can meet all dietary restrictions. Student Health Services team will check in with the students regularly to make sure they're doing well. And again, it's going to be a very close contact with student health to make sure the student is really being successful while being in isolation housing, and any basic needs or support services that is needed. Our campus partners, we will make sure that the students receive those services.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today, but I want to thank everyone for joining us. We'll be attempting to answer everyone's questions by updating the FAQ that is on the Return to Learn website and posting a recording of this town hall as well. I'd like to thank the presenters and guests for sharing their time and information with us today. And I thank you, the students, parents, and families of UC San Diego for attending today and working together as a community to help bring us through these unprecedented times. We had more than 400 attendees today, and these town halls are an important part of how we stay united as a community. To help improve them, we encourage you to complete the post-event survey that you'll be sent shortly to help us continue to refine our communications during this stressful period. There will be another parent and family webinar on Tuesday, August 31st, which will focus on student mental health and well-being, as well as return to campus for the fall. Please feel free to visit the parents' website to find out more information and to register. This concludes the Student, Parent, and Family Vaccine Mandate Town Hall. Thank you, take care, stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you on campus again soon.